just tell me a little bit about yourself, your background.
Sure. So I grew up in apartheid South Africa. And while I was a white South African and therefore not subject to the same trauma that a lot of my fellow South Africans were, it was nonetheless a time of a huge amount of chaos, complexity, and cruelty. At the time that I was growing up, your chances of learning how to read and write were lower as a female than your chance of being raped. So just to give you some idea of the context. And so from a very young age, I became interested in how people were navigating their situations, how the way we deal with our thoughts, our emotions, our stories, and the situations that we find ourselves in is really critical to our lifelong well-being.
That's fascinating because it was almost a coping mechanism, how you had to cope, how you had to change in order to survive.
Well, for so many people, and then of course as a white South African growing up in that environment, you have these emotions of incredible guilt, this growing recognition as you're a child that you are in a society where people are traumatized. And recognizing at that point, and this became stronger as I got older, that I needed to make choices about what was values-based for me and work towards those. And that might mean going against, a status quo. It might mean going sometimes even against what the law was defining that people do. So one example is that when I was growing up, a gathering of a couple of people was actually illegal. It was seen as being something whereby people would be planning subterfuge against the government. And so at the age of 15 and 16, friends and I got together with some people across the racial lines, which was illegal. And we were harassed. We had phones tapped, so very, very interesting context. But one other aspect of this for me was that around the age of 15 years old, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so I'd always been interested in how do people thrive in chaotic, complex environments. And then I became subject to a very particular type of chaos and loss. And what was fascinating was people coming to me with really wonderful intentions saying, just be positive. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And then having this remarkable English teacher who didn't try to pretend everything was going to be fine, but rather invited me to keep a journal. And so began a secret, silent correspondence with this teacher who would ask me questions and encourage me to really show up to what I was experiencing. And really what I recognized after that was it was not the push it aside, think positive that helped me. It was showing up in an honest, truthful way to my experience that enabled me to be resilient, because life's beauty is inseparable from its fragility, and its fragility is inseparable from its beauty. And unless we are able as human beings to enter into a space in ourselves and in the world in which we show up to that effectively, it's difficult for us to move forward.
That's almost poetic, and certainly it's true, but it's poetic in the way you described it.
Thank
really
you.
is.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about this. It's really interesting. We live in a culture that tells us to be positive and to think happy, and also that every single thought you have counts. You can wish your way into an alternative reality. And as a friend of mine who died of stage 4 breast cancer said, it sometimes feels like the tyranny of positivity. She said to me, if it was just a case of being positive, the people in my breast cancer support group would be alive today, and they are not. And this dialogue of just be positive, what it starts to do is it starts to actually blame people in some very inadvertent way for their own death. I wasn't positive enough. I couldn't think my way out of it. And really, you know, this applies to all types of situations. Life's beauty is inseparable from its fragility. We're with the people we love until we are not. We might be in a job that we love until for some reason that job isn't there anymore. And I really believe that as humans, we need to cultivate the ability to be with the fullness of our human experience. And that in doing that, we can actually step forward in the way we love, live, parent, and lead.